Again, joined by many of his fellow Republican candidates, elected officials, former electeds, and right now, again, a tight race. So we're keeping an eye on those numbers, but Janet, like you mentioned, there were some issues with the state website earlier, so we're still waiting for those numbers to come in, but we're keeping an eye on it. It's, again, a tight race, so we are here, and we're hoping to catch up with Senator Distaff once those results come in, win or lose. We're hoping to catch him and see what he has to say, but guys, we'll be on top of this for the rest of the night and keeping you up to date with the 8th District race. Again, a tight race between Senator Bill Distaff looking to hold his seat, challenged by the Democrat Missy Cotter-Smazel. Back to you guys.
All right, Chanu, thank you. Now, looking at the results that we have right now, and again, they've been coming in really, really slowly in Virginia Beach. This is just with 5% reporting, Distaff with 52.5%, and then I have 47 for Missy Cotter-Smazel. But that's just 5%.
It's going to be a long night. When you said things are trickling, boy, are they trickling slow.
Yeah, and it seems here in Virginia Beach that it's especially trickling given some of the issues going on with voters being long lines. I've heard students actually had to wait for an hour to vote in some of the Virginia districts today. There's a couple of districts that even ran out of ballots, a couple of precincts that ran out of ballots. So everyone who shows up before 7 o'clock can vote. And so we want to make it clear that everyone's vote will be counted. But what that means is that delays the results coming in a little bit. And between that and then the website issues, this is going to be a long night, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, and that says something about Virginia Beach. I think that's kind of like the ground zero for whether or not the balance of power. Because turnout has been really good in Virginia Beach, but a little slow in some of the other places that we've been
Virginia Beach, about 5 o'clock today, said that they had about 30% of their voters turn out, which is one of the highest turnouts they've had in the past election cycles. And so obviously this year you have the House of Delegates and the Senate. So, you know, looking at 2017, we had only the House of Delegates up. So voter turnout might be a little bit higher because there's more races. But here in Virginia Beach, because of some of the redistricting, we've got some of the most competitive races, particularly in the House, but even in the Senate with Distaff, and then obviously the Senate 7th, where we have someone who's not running back.
Right.
Now, this has been one of the bellwether districts that we've all been focusing on, the Bill Distaff race. He's been in the Senate since 2015. He has been in the House of Delegates since 2013. He was on the city council before that. So he's sort of a name brand that voters are familiar with. Missy Cotter-Smazel, that's a mouthful to say all those words without messing one of them up. Up until 2 weeks ago when her commercial started running, no one's ever heard of her. And so you think, well, how is it possible that she's even neck and neck with Bill? And I'm going to tell you the answer, and that is between the two of them, they have raised and spent $2.9 million on this race for a job that pays $18,000 a year.
That's correct.
What's up with that?
A lot of this is because it's the national issues coming forward. The Democrats see the opportunity to take over a seat that, given obviously the tragedy that happened in Virginia Beach, some of the issues that have been going on with gun control, the thoughts are this is a potential race that can flip the Senate. And remember, we've had both the House and the Senate here in Virginia just on the margins. The Senate is controlled by one vote. And if it even ties, then obviously the lieutenant governor will be the tie-breaking vote. So the Democrats' national committee is trying to provide a lot of money to support this race as well. But both of them have spent well over $1 million, $1.5 million on average between the two of them in this race. And that shows you just how competitive this seat is. You
mentioned guns, and that, if you watch the commercials, Janet and Nick both, you know that was the central thing. And so the question was, is it exploiting tragedy by mentioning guns, given that we had the mass shooting on May 31st, or is that a logical thing to talk about, given that we had the mass shooting on May 31st? And I guess it just depends who you ask.
And a lot of that just does depend on your preconceived ideas of what's going on. I mean, the reality is when you have such a horrible event, it takes the center stage. And so other issues, maybe healthcare or Medicare expansion, that might be issues talked about, fall by the wayside. And so because that happened locally, you know, can you say that that is using a tragedy to your advantage? It depends on if you find someone who supports Missy or if you find someone who's supporting Bill in this race.
But I wonder if Missy, as the numbers right now, this is very early, so we really don't know.
Yeah, 5%.
But if this were to hold up and Missy were to not win and she hung her entire hat on gun control, What does that say nationally next year, 2020? If you were a Dem, would that not be a smart thing to not run on since she may lose on it?
And that's actually a really important thing to kind of think about is with her basing so much of her campaign on this one issue. I mean, she does have other issues, but this is the issue that she has centralized in this campaign. If she doesn't win, you might read that, at least here in the Virginia Beach area, as not a winning issue. Now, obviously, Virginia Beach doesn't reflect the rest of the country, so in other states, maybe it is a winning issue, but I think that if she loses, it might be something to keep in mind in the 2020 election here in Virginia, that's not a primary concern of a lot of voters, at least in the Virginia Beach area.
And just to remind people who are watching, she is the one who actually had a survivor from that May 31st mass shooting who actually spoke out in an ad about gun control. She was criticized and praised alike for doing that.
That's right.
And so, it's just going to be curious to see how that plays out at the polls. Something interesting about this particular district, though, it's neck and neck, but think about this, okay? This district, Donald Trump won by 9 points.
Yes.
That's not a close race.
No,
won by 9 points.
And that's that's kind of what's interesting in a lot of the races that you're seeing that are competitive. You're seeing certain districts because of the redistricting in the House level where maybe Donald Trump had won, but they've added certain sections or certain precincts that weren't included in the 2017 race that makes it more likely that the other party might win. So there are a few Republican-leaning districts that are kind of up in the air because of this. And I think a lot of the Democrats are taking advantage, not in a bad way, but they're seeing there's an opening here. And they're trying to take that opening and say, we have momentum on our side. The 2017 election allowed them to take a lot of seats, taking basically a supermajority down to barely a Republican majority in the House of Delegates. And now with the Senate and the House of Delegates up, they kind of, if you want to say, smell blood in the water. And they think that they have the opportunity to flip both of these, where Virginia, which has been argued to be a purple state for so long, will have this trifecta where we'd have governor and lieutenant governor, the House and the Senate of one party. And so Democrats today are looking at these races very closely. They're looking particularly at Senate seat 8 as one of those key races that they think they can flip in their favor.
And just by the way, Northam, he did beat Gillespie by a point. So here you had Donald Trump, who won by 9 points in 2016. Then in 2017, Northam beats Gillespie by a point. So interesting district.
And a lot of that comes to turnout, because we know in presidential elections you have higher turnout. So there are people who turn out in these national races that don't turn out in the off-year elections.
And we were thinking it was only going to be in the 30s in terms of the overall statewide turnout. But what we have seen today, at least in the city of Virginia Beach, is it's at 150% of what it was 4 years ago, last off-year election.
That's right.
So if nothing else, these TV commercials that are hideous and that we all hate have ginned up interest in this election.
They do, and I don't want to talk too much about negative campaigning ad, but there's a reason why candidates run negative campaigns, and that's because that gets people angry. It gets emotions, and that means people are more likely to turn out. And so, for good or for bad, these negative campaign ads help draw lines and distinctions. And so, you're going to keep seeing them, particularly in these close races, as they're trying to have higher get-out-the-vote turnout.
Something else I was thinking about the 8th District, the question I asked you earlier about, whether it's exploiting or whether it's not.
Sure.
The 8th District is exactly where the shooting actually happened.
It did, and I think that's why Missy took, obviously, one of the survivors in this, because this is not just someone from a nearby district. This is a voter in her district that potentially is recognizing this as an important issue. And so, in a certain sense, we think that there are legitimate campaign ads where you interview voters and see what issues are on their heart. And I think that it's important to recognize they're not taking a tragedy from Sandy Hook or from somewhere in Northern Virginia. It's something that really affected
just
this
right
district
here.
Here.
Yeah, and so many people in her district, know the victims, know the people who were unfortunately targeted in that shooting.
Let me ask a question about we here in Hampton Roads, home of the world's largest naval base, 800,000 military veterans. I mean, clearly, any candidate that would advertise their their Navy bona fides would, enjoy some advantage, right? But in this case, both of them served their nation proudly as U.S. Navy veterans. So
Yes.
neither one of them gets the edge as far as that, because they both got a 2 thumbs up.
Yeah,
with the Navy.
and that actually goes to, if you want to say, the wise aspect of the parties choosing good candidates. One of the things that political parties want to do is they want to choose candidates that will use their brand, that will appeal to the specific local voters. And this being such a big Navy area, they know that you need to have someone, if you want to appeal to the Navy veterans, whatever party you are, you want to show that you have someone who loved this country, who has served this country, who has gone overseas. And so both political parties kind of try to grow possible candidates that have these resumes and hope to see them succeed. And I think that's why both the Democrats and the Republicans in the Virginia Beach area tend to dominantly run people with a long Navy record.
We're going to be watching this one again. I think it's going to be a long night. It's going to be a while before we have the results on that one.
Yes.
And it could be the same thing in the 7th between Jen Kiggins and Cheryl Turpin, also a Virginia Beach race that a lot of people are watching. The last results that we were able to get is that Kiggins is leading in that race.
That's correct, and it's still very close, only within about 4%, but we're at least seeing more of the precincts reporting. So we've got about 53 precincts reporting the last I saw on this, and I'm updating this on my computer as I can kind of see. But it's still a fairly close race with only about 1,000 votes separating them. And so with only about half the precincts in, this is still anyone's game. But Keegan's winning. This was a Republican seat, obviously, Frank Wagner's seat. And so it kind of leans Republican. But obviously Cheryl Turpin, who had won and beat Rocky Holcomb in the House district, is now trying to move up to the Senate. She's from the area. She's got a good reputation. She won a red-leaning seat previously. And so she thinks she has the ability to go forward here. But, I think both of them, again, going back to resumes, have solid resumes, teachers, nurses, both of them.
Nurse practitioner.
Yeah. Navy pilot.
Navy pilot, exactly. But again, they've got good resumes. And of course, the things that they're interested in, the policies they tend to emphasize and focus on, are ones that kind of are linked to their backgrounds. And so, focusing on education or focusing on appropriate health care provisions and mental health care.
So the weird thing for us is we had hoped to come on at this hour tonight and be able to tell our Facebook viewers conclusively how everything is. And we're in this odd posture right now where we don't know what we don't know, but what we do know is we don't know much, if that makes any sense. I mean, this is just a crazy, crazy situation. But what I can tell you is the Associated Press has called that the state Senate has flipped to control of the Democrats. The Republicans have held that chamber, control of it, for 5 years. And so if that is true, that's a big headline.
That is a big headline, yeah. So from the data that's been coming in, all incumbent Democrats have been declared winners. So it's really just the incumbent Republican seats that are up in the air. And again, that shows that there's this, I don't want to call it a blue wave, we talked about that in 2017, but there's momentum on the Democrat side. And there are 2 Senate seats, one in Northern Virginia and one outside Richmond, that have now been called for the Democrats. And they were previously Republican seats. One was with a retiring Republican, and the other was an incumbent who has lost. And so at this point, if all the races where you have Republicans leading, and again, it's not called, but if we just say where the Republicans are leading, if it turns out that they win, it looks like the Democrats are going to have 21 seats in the Senate.
And this means something actually very urgent, right? As far as public policy going forward, we're in store for something of a sea change here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, because for the last 5 years, we've had Republicans in control of that chamber, and now with Democrats seemingly going to be in control come January. What's it going to mean? What do you think in terms of the types of public policy?
Yeah, this is a great question. And, it's going to depend a little bit on what goes on in the House as well, because all bills have to be passed by House and Senate. But with the Senate having its own control, and obviously with Democrat controlling the governor's mansion, you're going to probably see some of these policies like gun control that are going to come up a little bit more. You're probably going to see some more discussion about the legalization of marijuana in the state, maybe not in the way California does it, but at least for health issues. And you're going to see some of the policies that bring in some independence, right? Because they're not going to try to go for these really left-leaning Medicare for all that you hear at the national level, because that's not Virginia. But they're going to start taking some steps to some of those policies that would bring in independence to support them as well. But I would say what I think the biggest take with the Senate changing hands is actually something that's still a few years out. And that's going to be the redistricting of 2020. We know the census is coming out in 2020.
Right.
In 2021, we're going to have to redraw our districts at the for congressional seats at the national level, as well as our House seats. And so these members of the Senate will likely be the ones that will vote on what's drawn. Now, obviously, we'll have another House election before that's officially drawn, but these Senate members are going to be able to have a say on what the district maps of the Virginia are going to look like after the 2020 census.
And that could have huge implications.
It does. It'll have implications over our representatives at the national level. We've had major issues going up nationally over gerrymandering and district drawing, and that's a really central issue. Even in the races we're seeing for the House of Delegates here, we had districts that had to be redrawn by the courts.
Just in January.
Just in January, yeah, because the state legislature couldn't find an agreement on what the district should look like. And that's arguably why some of these races, at least in the House seats, are so strange and so close. And I don't want to jump the gun maybe, but I just want to maybe mention two House seats that have flipped. And I would argue largely because of this, or at least appearing to flip.
Simons and Jones.
Yeah,
Yancey
so Yancey, who, if you recall in 2017, I don't know, I actually remember sitting in my house, the electricity went off. I think the hurricane had come through on the day that they were going to draw the name from a bull. So I was sitting in my living room with my phone as my only internet source, watching the live drawing of the name from the bull. But Yancey has lost his seat, and that was affected in the drawing. And then Chris Jones, who's a very powerful member of the House Appropriations Committee, who's been in the seat for 20 years, I want to say.
He's a chair of that committee.
He's a chair. He's a chair of the Appropriations Committee. And
22 years he's been in.
22 years, yeah. And he lost re-election. And both of those, I think you can say, come because of the way the districts were redrawn by the court district. They made what was leaning Republican districts now to leaning or strongly Democrat districts.
And just a quick note, right, to our Facebook viewers. We're going to stick with us. We're going to have a live shot in just a little bit from the peninsula, from Shelley Simon's campaign headquarters. So don't leave us. We're going to get to that in our second half hour.
Yes, we're going to get to that.
You want to talk about this one? This is the one, Turpin. We were talking about Turpin earlier.
Sure.
She gave up her House seat, her blue House seat, to run for Senate.
And that has flipped.
Well, we think it's going to.
It looks like Rocky. So she beat Rocky Holcomb in 2017 for the seat, and he had been there because he had won a special election, so he had only been there for a short period of time. Turpin defeated him in the.
We're just hearing from our producer. The Associated Press is saying Rocky lost.
Really?
That's what our producer is saying in my ear, and that Alex Askew, who I'd never heard of until I met him at ODU football tailgate 2 weeks ago Saturday, and he come up and shook my hand and told me he was running against Rocky. I'm very surprised with that.
All right, Leah, let's take a look at that.
I'll tell you another reason I'm surprised with it.
There it is.
85th?
I voted St. Matthew's Catholic Church in Virginia Beach in the 85th district.
Okay.
So I walk in at 10:30 this morning, and who's the very first person out on the sidewalk under the umbrella shaking my hand but Rocky Holcomb's mother.
Yeah.
And Rocky Holcomb's mother says to me, she says, he's a good boy, and I'm not just saying that because he's my son. I am very surprised that Alex won.
You know, again, it was I'm a little surprised too. And again, for everyone watching, we've been trying to keep up with these updates, and the Virginia Department website had a glitch where we had information, and it sounds like a lot of precincts just came in all of a sudden. So thank you for the producer for bringing that information to us.
Right, because I thought that was going to be one that was going to go back to the Republicans.
So that stays blue.
That stays blue, which that was one of the few races where the Republicans thought they had a chance to gain a seat back. If you think about it, most of the seats they're playing defense on, but that was one of the ones that they thought. And again, they're running someone who used to hold the seat. He's not against the incumbent, so you would think a former person of that seat would have a advantage. But Alex Askew looks like he won it by just over 1,200 votes.
Rocky had Marine Corps going for him. He's the chief of deputies for the Virginia Beach Sheriff's Department.
Yeah.
I mean, he checks all the boxes for red-leaning voters.
Yeah.
Plus having his mom out there shaking hands. I'm stunned. I don't know how he lost.
And we're looking at, like, with the Chris Jones seat and this one, fairly newcomers, because, Clint Jenkins, who won that seat.
Yep.
I believe he ran for council one time
in Suffolk, and I think he lost.
In Suffolk and didn't win. His wife is a school board member.
Right.
And he's a real estate agent.
Right.
And decided it was the only person who filed to run against Chris Jones.
Which itself means that if you think about it, back at the filing time, the redrawn districts weren't there, so most people thought that would be a suicide mission, right? I mean, Chris Jones has held that district for so long, and so when the filing was going on, you may not have known that it would be under this new district. So he took a chance, and he was willing to say, I'm going to step up, I'm going to put the platform out there, and he came out and won. And to some degree, there's a movement in both Republican and Democrat ideas that you want people who have been in the seats for a long time. You want, fresh blood in there. And so I don't know if maybe that came up to bother Chris Jones a little bit, that he's been there so long. People wanted, fresh face.
And one of the
new
things
ideas.
that he talked about was playing a role in the Medicaid expansion.
Right.
Even though he had voted against it several times before.
Right.
Wanted to wait until it was right, he said.
Right.
Yeah, he ended up working with Northam on a deal to actually get it expanded.
Sure. Yeah.
And we saw that a lot in his ads.
Yes.
But apparently it did not register with voters.
And, that might have turned off some of his loyal Republican votes, right? So he was trying to bring in some more moderates to support him. But, there were a few, I forget who it was, up in Northern Virginia. There was a Republican incumbent who lost in the primary because he voted for the Medicare expansion, and the Republican who took him on had really taken him to task for that. And so there you see sometimes that the Republicans are not a big fan of that action.
Right.
So a little political insider baseball, but since we have you here and you're the academic on this, all congratulations to Clinton, great victory for him. But what kind of a loss do you think this represents for Hampton Roads, not having the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee bringing the bacon home to Hampton Roads? Yeah,
this is where, one of the important things to understand, that in working in any legislative body, that a freshman is, I always joke, is like a freshman in high school. You're just learning the hallways and who to talk to and which teachers that you are good, which teachers are bad. And when you've been in the legislative body for a while, you have institutional memory, but you also have a reputation for people listening to you and following your ideas. And so when you lose someone, particularly a chair of such a powerful committee, there is an influence that is going to be lost from the Hampton Roads area, because obviously I don't think really anyone else, even a Democrat from the Hampton Roads area, is going to be brought up to the chair of that committee, even if the Democrats hold it. So you're going to have someone from Northern Virginia, maybe I would guess probably from Northern Virginia.
Well, that probably would have happened anyway, right? Because if there's a blue flip of the entire House, there's no way that Chris would have been the chair.
Right, he wouldn't have been the chair, but he would still been ranking member, and there is, it's not as fun to be in the minority, but even as ranking member, you have certain privileges and influence. And particularly because he'd been the chair before, there's still kind of that unofficial influence where people just ask him, like, hey, how does this work? How does, and where you can give some insight across party lines. So, whether that means we're going to get less funding for roads here in Hampton Roads, that's going to be hard to predict. But it's possible. It's possible that there could actually be some infrastructure projects that might not actually come this way that might have previously.
Go ahead, Jen.
What about, unless you want to stay on this race, I wanted to ask him about... I was
going to ask a bigger question, but go ahead.
Okay, we were looking at that, was it Barry Knight?
Yeah, Barry Knight.
Yes.
So let me just get an update. So this is kind of a surprising race as well. It's not called yet, but this is House District 81. So Barry Knight District is the Pungo area of Virginia Beach down to Chesapeake and out towards a little bit of rural culture. He always says, I'm just a pig farmer from Virginia Beach, and so he talks to the rural people. He, obviously a lot of the voters in his area are farmers as well. But again, going back to that redistricting, his seat went from a solid Republican seat to where now it's about 53% dominated by Democrats, which means, all things being equal, people vote their party. So it now means it leans Democrat. And looking at the race right now, where it stands as of this moment, almost at 10 o'clock, with just over half of the precincts in, Barry Knight is losing 54 to 45. And I will be honest, that's surprising. I mean, I've spoken to some Republican leaders. I actually spoke to Governor McDonnell a few weeks ago, and he and I were talking about this race. It's where I live. I live in Barry Knight's district. So,
well, tell me about Len Myers. I'm going to be honest with you. I've never heard of Len Myers.
I'll be perfectly honest. I don't know.
Another newcomer.
Yeah, another newcomer. I don't know a lot about him either. Again, he's from the Suffolk side of the district, but honestly, I just get like I said, I'm from that district, so I get some of the political flyers that have come in, but I had never heard of him prior to this race myself. And so again, it's a little bit surprising that these newcomers are doing so well, but it's also they're doing so well in districts that got changed. And so the incumbents, their power, the people who they've appealed to, it's not the same voters as it always has been.
I think I'm seeing another surprise, and you tell me if this is surprising to you, is 50-50. And that is, well, maybe it isn't, Colin Stolley.
Colin Stolley. Oh, Chris Stolley. Sorry.
He's a Commonwealth's attorney.
Yeah.
Ken Stolley is the sheriff.
Yeah, so the Chris Stolley in 83.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you for just pulling this up. I didn't notice this. So currently this is literally tied.
50-50, yeah.
So hopefully we don't.
Guy.
Yeah, so Nancy Guy versus Chris Stolley, it's 50-50.
But she's not a newcomer.
No,
she's not. She's been around for a while. But again, Chris Stolley, he's the incumbent. He's been there for a little while. We only have about just over half the precincts in, so this can still change. But seeing it at half the precincts being 50-50 shows that this race is really tight. And I'm not going to predict which way it's going to go. All I know is that the Democrats thought they had a good shot at this seat, and so they're doing their best to try to make that work out. What's going to actually happen here, I don't know. But what you would expect is kind of what's going on, where Stolley is doing much better in the districts that are the Virginia Beach side of that district, and then Guy is doing well in the Norfolk City district. So I'm just kind of breaking it down to precincts.
We have a little breaking news. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Please.
Producer Emily, she's speaking into our ears again.
Yeah, she's like the little person in our ears.
The Associated Press now saying that the Democrats have gained control of both chambers, the House of Delegates and the State Senate.
First time in 20 years.
First time in 20 years. And first time in, I think, about 22 years that they've had the governorship as well. So so Virginia as a whole, we're going to see some policy changes. I think it's
this brings me back to my other bigger question I was going to ask a second ago. Tip O'Neill said, "All politics is local." How much of this is national? The elephant in the room here. We're not talking about the man not on the ballot named Donald J. Trump. But how many people might have showed up today motivated one way or the other because of him?
I think that's very true. I mean, obviously we had Mike Pence, who was just here in Virginia Beach the past few days, and he was telling us that this election was a stepping stone to the 2020. You had Joe Biden up in Northern Virginia who made some very similar statements. A lot of the advertisement going out by the political parties, so not the candidates themselves, but the political parties, were actually campaigning on national issues and not local issues. So I think it can be said that a lot of what we're seeing here is a response to some of the national trends and the national activities going on. Now, again, I still agree with Tip O'Neill that all politics is local, and that's why going back to the resumes of some of the people running are so important to do well. You have to run the right candidates in the local districts. But I do think a lot of the voters are responding to some of the national issues going on, whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's the Democrat people running, whether it's the impeachment inquiry. All of these are, I think, influencing at least enthusiasm and turnout.
Okay, we're also hearing that the AP is calling Distaff as the winner.
Look at that.
In that district, the 8th?
The 8th district.
So Missy ran her gun campaign and was unsuccessful. It looks like it's very close, but if they're calling it for Distaff, then that's a Republican hold at that point. But yeah, that's interesting. So we'll see what that does to maybe the Democrats' idea of gun control. If the main candidate who ran with that as one of their primary issues didn't win, that becomes a question of, are they going to make it such a central issue when they take control, when they're all sworn in? And Bill Distaff, some people may not know this, is a licensed registered gun dealer. I did not know that. Yeah, so how about that? Interesting. That would come up. Not that he does that. Right. But that that I'm mentioning that. Yeah. Interesting. I didn't know that.
And also, I'm looking here that seat, the Senate seat 12 of Donovan, it looks like he's winning that seat now.
Okay.
With 95%.
That's the one out by Richmond. It's northwest of Richmond. None of the viewers are there, but.
But when you're looking at how many are being flipped,
yes,
it looked like for a while that was going to be one of them. What I'm seeing now is just 2, and that's Black. We talked about that.
Gary Higgins losing up in
Gary
Northern
Higgins
Virginia.
And Sturdivant.
Yep. And then and Sturdivant, which I think Central Virginia, if I remember correctly.
Right,
yeah,
so
those are the only 2.
So we don't have a blue tsunami here at this point.
It's really not, and
it's like a little wave, but it's not like just a typhoon.
But I think it's important to recognize that after 2017, particularly in the House of Delegates, you had what we called the blue wave, and there was such a takeover that the Republicans, because it really came down to Yancey's seat up on the peninsula with being pulled out of a hat, whether the Republicans would gain the majority or not. And so now once you have a big wave, all you need is that second really small wave to go and make you that difference, right? And so, the Democrats don't have to bring in 10 or 15 flips, just a couple. And we're seeing that they're getting 2, 3. And so the other thing to remember, though, is that means the Democrats aren't going to have a strong majority. So they're still going to have to work on some bipartisan levels as well.
Okay, we want to go to Virginia Beach because Bill Distaff is now declared the winner with 52% of the vote, and we do know that that's where Chanu Her is. He is live with the Distaff campaign. So, Chanu, they don't seem to be too happy. Do they know yet?
Yeah, Janet, this actually just came down from the Associated Press saying that Senator Bill Distaff will retain his seat in the 8th District Senate race, beating the Democrat Missy Cotter Smazel. So we're still waiting to see Senator Distaff come in the room here. It seems like some of the winners tonight have been getting up on the stage to speak. So we're still waiting to see when that will be. Like you mentioned, Janet, I don't know that many people have heard yet. Again, this was called by the Associated Press just a few minutes ago, so this is all fresh breaking news, so we're still waiting for there to be an official announcement here tonight. But I do know Senator Bill Distaff is in the building. I spoke to him maybe about an hour ago, so I do know he's here along with other candidates who have ran and who have won tonight. So again, he's in the building. We're just waiting to see when he's going to come in and take the stage. I'm just trying to keep my eye out for him here. But again, the Associated Press called it in favor of Senator Bill Distaff beating out Missy Smazel. So as soon as we get him here, we'll let you guys know and bring you the latest right here from the Crown Plaza near Town Center. Back to you.
Hey, Chanu, Mike here. Quick question for you. When you saw Bill, did he seem upbeat or did he seem like a guy that was still a little nervous? What was your sense?
Yeah, so when I saw Senator Distaff earlier, the race was still really tight. The numbers are really close, so he didn't seem too upbeat, but he seemed very focused, and that's probably the best way I can put it. He seemed very focused. He seemed like he was with some of his campaign folks and really just zoned in on the race, keeping an eye on everything. So again, guys, it still was a really tight race up until it was called. So yeah, Mike, he was very, very zoned in on the race here.
Thank you.
Okay, and so that was one of the big ones being watched in Virginia Beach, but they still haven't called Turpin-Kiggins yet.
They haven't.
That one's still pretty close?
That's still very close. So with the latest information I have, it looks like Kiggins is ahead by about 700 votes.
So it's gotten closer.
So it's gotten a little bit closer. The Virginia Department of Elections website says 48 precincts are reporting, but they'd said that earlier as well. And so I think that's just one of those glitches that's going on. But I think we're getting close because there's been about 40,000 ballots cast in that district, and I would expect there to be not much more than that. So I'm expecting that will be called probably before the 11 o'clock news.
And your sense is probably Kiggins at this
I think at this point, if I had to bet, I would bet Kiggins at this, but it's still going to be really close. And if it gets close enough, 0.5%, then you can get into a recount. So we'll have to see. Right now, it's above 1% victory. So there wouldn't be an auto recount.
I wonder if Cheryl Turpin, though, if she should lose, and then she's already given up her House seat. Wow, man, oh man.
Yeah.
Poor girl, she lost them both.
Yeah, she'll probably surface again. Who knows?
I think she might. I think someone who's done as well and run a tight race like this might surface again, maybe even in 2020 for something.
She was my daughter's 9th grade earth science teacher.
Okay, we want to go to Newport News because Shelley Simons won that race. She won it big, which I know that there was some redistricting involved there, but I'm a little surprised at that 18-point difference.
Yeah, that's so. I don't think Yancey's district changed by that much of a percentage. And so I think I don't really know how to read that. I don't know if this is just a little bit of a frustration over they thought she should have had it in 2017 and her supporters just came out in force. That to me, I'm not totally surprised with the result. I'm surprised at this margin of victory.
Yeah, the margin is okay. Well, we have a reporter who is live with the Simons campaign. Madeline Schmidt, are you there? There she goes.
Yes, I am here. I'm here. Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to tell you guys, it is really a totally different story tonight from this same moment in 2017 when that race was just too close to call. But as we have been reporting, like you just said, Shelley Simons managed to rake in about 58% of the vote tonight. Yancey at 40%. Last time his name, the way it all ended, it was pulled out of a bowl. That's how Yancey won it, with that tie vote. Now, the Republican incumbent just could not keep his seat this time around. He's held it. He's been representing Newport News since 2012, but Simons was feeling very confident tonight. By 8:30, she was on the stage here giving that victory speech, very excited. I do want to bring you some of that speech that she was giving tonight. Again, we're here in Newport News at the Marriott at City Center. Here it is. Oh, I'm sorry. I just was told that we do not have part of that speech. Maybe we can bring it to you a little bit later. I do want you to know, though, that we did reach out, of course, to the Yancey campaign. I was told that he was not having any sort of traditional watch party tonight. I reached out after Simons gave her speech, and the Yancey campaign told me that they will not be giving any sort of statement or even interviews tonight, maybe tomorrow. So that's the latest we have on that. I'm going to toss it back to you guys for now.
All right, thank you, Madeline, up there at the Marriott in City Center in Newport News, and there was at least one person behind her dancing.
I saw that.
Noticed the one gentleman, I guess he's still celebrating.
Extremely odd that David Yancey would not speak, but perhaps he's, disappointed. And he must have had early internal polling that showed him it was going to go that way. When I sat down with him, we weren't in this room. I think we were in the room upstairs. But when I sat down with him about a week ago, he still seemed pretty upbeat. I mean, he thought that he as close as it was last time, coming down to pulling a name out of a film canister out of a bowl, that he had a chance. He didn't give off the vibe of a guy who knew that he was dead man walking.
I have a feeling that that's just playing up while the election's still going. I mean, I'll be honest, if you're not having a watch party, it's, to me, that kind of says that you're not going to win. Because obviously you want to reward your supporters, you want to have a celebration of the victory and the hard work that your volunteers and other people have put into you. So now, I have not done a lot of study on that, but to me, as soon as I heard that he didn't have a watch party, that struck me as odd, because most candidates in close races races are going to have a watch party
Right,
to reward their supporters.
Right, exactly. Well, it was a hard-fought race.
It was.
Shelley Simon's a school board member. She's not a newcomer. Very, very involved in various groups and organizations.
You live over there. in that
Yeah,
district,
that's
right?
my district.
Okay.
And
Did you get a ton of flyers?
Okay, every day.
Yeah.
Every day in the mail.
I'm sure.
Was, 3 for her, 2 for him,
Yeah.
3 for him, 2 for her. So, yeah, and then everyone knocked on my door.
Yeah, I'm sure. And actually, I was looking up at what percentage changed. And so with the redistricting, it moved about 13% more Democratic than it was.
Okay.
So I still think 18% is
And then you think about
a big
Libertarian
change.
on the ballot.
The Libertarian really didn't pull in many votes. So the Libertarian has less than 2% of the votes. Michael Bartley was his name. He had less than 400 votes
You got
in this
625
race.
2 years ago.
Right. So I think a lot of people
Yeah.
decided to not split that. If you're an independent and you're thinking of going with a third party, they decided not to do that.
So even if all of those voters of his, being libertarian leaning, probably more likely to vote red than blue, even if they'd all voted for David, he still would have lost.
That's right. Yeah. So you can't say that he was a spoiler in this race at all, as they claimed back in 2017, because they thought, that the Libertarians would more likely vote Republican. Although I'll be perfectly honest, I'm finding that a little bit less of the case nowadays with things like marijuana legalization. I've seen Libertarians I know being much more willing to talk to and interact with the Democratic Party than they used to.
I've noticed that too. Mm-hmm.
What kind of a difference do you think this is going to make, specifically with having David in there now instead of Shelley? Just the types of bills, or Shelley in there instead of David. What kind of types of bills do you suppose that Shelley would bring that David would not?
I think obviously, Shelley obviously has a deep respect for the community and having been up in the area. I honestly am not sure I would expect there to be tremendous differences. Obviously some of their political leanings are going to have a say, but I think both of them have a deep connection and respect for the community, so they're going to try to do what they think is best for the community. And so, I think to a certain degree, it's still the same community. And so it's important to recognize you might have emphasis on a certain issue that wasn't as salient with Yancey, that's now more salient with Shelley. But the reality is they're going to probably listen to what their people are really interested in. So I would expect there to be maybe a little bit more health care legislation, maybe not expansion of Medicare a little bit more, but possibly trying to modify that Medicare expansion to allow other things to be covered by it that wasn't covered under the original bill. But I don't think you're going to see a strong left-leaning radical platform come out of there.
Now, this will be the first time in a long time that we've had a Democrat-controlled House of Delegates. The last time we had a gentleman named Mr. Thomas W. Moss Jr. was the Speaker of the House, Democrat from the city of Norfolk. God rest his soul, was a great man. He's a long time ago. My son is 20, so he wasn't even alive last time Democrats were in control.
Wow. Yeah, and think about that though. Your son, I don't know if he voted in this election, but your son. So there are a lot of people voting, not for the first time necessarily. Hopefully he voted in 2017 as well. But there are people who are voting for the first or second time in their lives that have no recollection of ever being under a House of Delegates that wasn't under Republican control. And so, that itself will be very interesting. Now, we know that younger people don't turn out as much, so I think most of the people who are turning out to these votes do remember the Democrat-controlled House and the Democrat-controlled Senate, if they live in the area. But since we're such a big Navy area, that's the other thing too, is so many of the people haven't lived here for 20 some odd years.
Right.
And so, that flux actually, I think, partly explains why the Democrats are having a stronger influence, because you're getting a lot of people moving from other states, and in doing that, you're bringing in some, maybe newer ideas that haven't been what was deeply held by the Republicans who have been here for their whole lives.
A couple of questions. Okay, so nationally, we know that the country was watching Virginia tonight.
Yes.
So tomorrow there are going to be headlines and they're going to be talking about this race. What is the national headline going to be? What does it say about 2020?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it's hard to say what it says about 2020 nationally, right? Remember 2017 we talked about this blue tsunami or blue wave that people were talking about, and this is not as many Democrats taking over, but it's getting over the end zone, right? So if you think about it, the 2017 was that big long pass that took you from the 20-yard line all the way down, across midfield, all the way down to the 1-yard line, but the Democrats didn't yet get control. And so now you've got just that small yardage, you put in your running back, just barrel on through. I think if you look at this in that perspective, it's not the size of the victory that's going to be such a big deal, but rather it's the fact there's an energized Democratic electorate in Virginia that's argued to be a purple state. And Virginia now has all three branches that are going to be Democrats. And so I think for 2020, it shows that Republicans across the country are going to have to look at some of those suburban ideas, those suburban locations that were generally strongly Republican that now seem to be more on the moderate Democrats. I would argue this is a warning to the Democrats at the national level as well, because if they run someone too far extreme, they may not get those moderate votes as well. And so, but I think it shows that there is a frustration at the national level with the way things currently are. And there's a lot of enthusiasm specifically on the Democrat side. I do think there is on the Republican side as well, but the Democrats had a stronger turnout. And we saw that Virginia Beach had the largest turnout in the past decade in this. And I've heard also from friends of mine up in Loudoun County and other areas that they were having huge turnouts across the state.
But Nick, if we got in the Wayback Machine for just a second, go back in time 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Look at the disarray the Democrats were in with Ralph Northam and his blackface scandal, and Herring, he had the same problem. And Fairfax, he had his sexual assault problem. Republicans back then were probably rubbing their hands together thinking this is going to be our year. Yeah. Turned out not to be. What do you make of that?
I think that's really important. That goes back to this question you mentioned earlier with Tip O'Neill saying all politics are local. You would think something like that would have a greater impact at the local level. And the fact it didn't, I think, goes to show what's really pressing a lot of the voter turnout and enthusiasm right now are the national concerns. Because a lot of the Democrats in the state of Virginia were calling for Northam's resignation. Were calling for Fairfax to perhaps step down. I mean, there was a lot of backlash for this, and they were able to hold off, and they're still in office. And, you know, I think now it can be said that, and I think the Republicans thought it would.
So if this was a referendum on that, it's mission accomplished for the Democrats.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would bet that most Democrat voters did not turn out thinking about Northam or Fairfax. I think if they weren't thinking about their local race, they were thinking about the national issues. I don't think most were thinking of a statewide concern in this particular election.
Were they thinking about Trump?
I think so. I think most of them were either, you know, voting there because, as you mentioned, Rocky Holcomb's mother was at the district earlier. You know, so you have the very local people turning out. Jason Miraz's wife was on the radio talking about her husband as being a good man. You have a lot of these, you know, nice local appeal. But I think if it wasn't the local appeal that was the concern, I think it was the national that was driving turnout.
And I just have one more question for you before we wrap things up. And looking to, you know, next year and the 2020 election, you know, we have watched over the last, since 2008, Virginia be such a battleground state. Yeah. And it just seems like in a matter of, 10 years, it has moved so much into the blue column. Yeah. How much of a battleground is Virginia even going to be?
I would be surprised if Virginia will be called a battleground state. I think it will in 2020 for one last time. But a weak battleground. Yeah, but a very weak battleground because, you know, if you look at Hillary Clinton won in 2016, you know, you've had where now we have the House, Senate, and governor of the Democratic Party. This is starting to look like that we are a leaning Democrat state at this point. Now, I think the thing to remember is these trends are never permanent, and it will, you know, the Democrats will be in control perhaps for a decade, and then something may happen and it may turn. And that's kind of the way politics works, is you have someone in control for a while and eventually they lose favor and someone comes up and says, I've got better ideas, and they step forward, and that party often takes control.
Yeah. It's just interesting to see how that has transpired, to watch it all go from point A to point P.
Yeah.
It's been pretty amazing.
It really is. And, a lot of people pointed to Northern Virginia. I think that has something to do with it. But again, we're seeing our area, which had been reliably Republican, turning to our area is now much more purple. And again, with even some of the House delegate seats going on, if Barry Knight loses, and I'm looking to see if that's been called in the 81st yet. It hasn't been, but with Chris Jones's loss, with Yancey's loss, here you had Republican seats that are flipping. And so I'd say our area is purple, and the state is still likely to be moving blue.
I'm sitting here thinking the last time a Republican won a statewide election in Virginia was probably McDonnell, right? That's a long time ago.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah,
I'd have to think
ago.
is that 2010, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
almost a full decade ago.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and again, I think that's kind of the point in which you started this slow movement. And some of it you could argue is the Republicans, at least at the statewide, may not have always run the best candidates. There's some argument to be made there. But that being said, I think that they have run some good candidates the statewide election, and they have fallen short as well.
And to think, when Barack Obama won in 2008, it was the first time Virginia had chosen a Democrat for president since 1964.
Yep, since 1964. That's right. And if you think about it, that means we have moved from 2008 in 10 years to 2019. Where that small victory, which was so revolutionary in 2008, is now taken hold. And again, I think we are a moderately leaning Democrat state.
All right, let's go to Distaff's victory speech. He's giving that now in Virginia Beach.
Come on, guys, everybody, come on up. Lee, Brandon, everybody, come on over, guys. Come on. John, Tina, get Tina Mapes up here.
Any update on the race?
We have it. Yeah, so we're calling the race. We won by just over 2,000 points. 2,000 votes. For everybody who volunteered today, I want to tell you that this is grassroots. At the lowest level, grassroots up, showing that if you spend $2.5, $2.7 million, grassroots still beats it. Every one of you, because grassroots wins over money. Thank you. Now, for the entire team, I got to tell you, there's not one person who's ever elected that does it alone. Not one person has ever done it alone, nor will one person ever do it alone. It doesn't matter how much money you put in it, from New York and California. We're showing Virginia Beach is not for sale. This has been a very, very, very close election. A lot of people have been on the edge of their seat all night. I'm thankful for God. I'm thankful for everybody who worked out there, for every single one of us. Keep in mind, we can't do it alone. We've got a lot of work to do. We've got to work our grassroots. We've got to build it up for the next year, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We've got to make sure that we change this in the future. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time. Thank you for volunteering. Please enjoy. Please relish in your victory. Thank you again very much for everything. Have a great evening, guys. No one can do this without you. Let's give everybody in this room a round of applause for our volunteers. Thank you.
All right, there you have it. Bill Distaff, his victory speech there in Virginia Beach, won by, what he said, 2,000 votes, about 2,000 votes.
2,000 points, he said first.
He said points, I know. But over Missy Cotter Smazel. So he will be going back to Richmond, but he will be in the minority this time.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be a different day in Richmond for Bill and all of his red pals.
Yeah, it's going to be a different day, and that wraps up our coverage on Facebook Live. I appreciate you spending this time with us, Professor.
Thank you for having me. It's been a delight to be here.
It has been fun. Always, Mike.
Well, I do what I can.
Make sure you join us at 11 o'clock. 13 News Now at 11 with David Allen and Nicole Livas coming up in just about a half hour. All right, enjoy your evening.
See ya. Nicole and David will be over there. You and me will be here, but we can go stretch our legs for a minute.